I was sitting alone watching the evening news when my son called me, his voice shaking. "Dad," she collapsed. "We need you." I rushed to the hospital without asking a single question. When the doctor said the treatment would cost $400,000, I knew what I had to do. I sold my house, my truck, and gave them every dollar. I had $365 of $500 because I believed I was saving my family. But after 3 days of unanswered calls, I stood at their door and heard the words that shattered my world. There was never any treatment. Welcome to Silent Dad Revenge, and thank you for being here. Before we begin, tell me which city or country are you listening from? Your answer means the world to me. Hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs it. Some elements in this story are fictional, added for educational purposes. Names and settings are coincidental, but the lesson inside is not. I have a photograph on the shelf above my workbench. It is nothing fancy, just a small square photo in a wooden frame, the kind you pick up at a dollar store because you need something to hold the picture, not to impress anyone. In it, Margaret is laughing. Really laughing, head thrown back, eyes squeezed shut, one hand pressed against her chest, like the joy was too big to stay inside her. I took that picture on a Sunday afternoon in our backyard in Reseda, 2 summers before she got sick. I look at it every morning. Some mornings it makes me smile. Other mornings it makes me feel like someone reached into my chest and squeezed. My name is Frank Miller. I am 65 years old. I spent 40 years as an auto mechanic, 40 years of grease under my fingernails, 40 years of engines that roared back to life under my hands, 40 years of customers who shook my hand and said, "Frank, you're the only one I trust with this car." I retired 3 years ago when my knees started arguing with me every time I crouched down too long. The shop on Roscoe Boulevard, the one where Marcus Webb and I worked side by side for 11 years, is still there. I just am not in it anymore. Margaret and I bought our little house in Reseda back in 1991. 1,200 square feet, a lemon tree in the backyard, a kitchen so small 2 people could barely turn around in it without bumping elbows. We loved every inch of it. We raised our son Chris in that house. I remember the afternoon we stood in the kitchen doorway with a ruler and a pencil, measuring how tall he had grown. Margaret wrote it right on the wood. Chris, age 842, in her careful looping handwriting. I never painted over it. Not once in all those years. Chris is 38 now. He works as an auto mechanic, same as me. He learned at my knee, literally sitting on an overturned milk crate in the driveway while I talked him through his first oil change. I was so proud of him that day I thought my chest might burst. He met Irene Torres 6 years ago at a barbecue a coworker threw in Burbank. He called me that same evening, his voice pitched higher than usual, words tumbling over each other like he could not get them out fast enough. "Dad, I met someone." I know that sounds crazy. I know it was one afternoon, but Dad, she's different. She actually listened to everything I said. She laughed at my dumb jokes. She asked me about Grandma's lemon tree. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Son," I told him, "if she already knows about the lemon tree, you better not let that one go." He did not let her go. They married 2 years later. A small ceremony at a park in Glendale with folding chairs and a cake that leaned slightly to the left. Irene wore a cream dress and looked at my son like he was the only person in the room. I sat in the front row and pressed Margaret's handkerchief against my eyes, the small one she had embroidered with lavender flowers along the edge, and told myself she was watching from somewhere and smiling that same big laugh-out-loud smile. Life settled into a good rhythm after that. Chris and Irene lived over in Burbank, about 40 minutes from me on a light traffic day. I had my mornings with coffee and the news, my afternoons tinkering with an old motorcycle I kept promising myself I would finish restoring, and every few weeks Chris would come by and we would sit on the back porch and talk about nothing in particular. Those evenings were the best part of my week. I kept Margaret's handkerchief in the breast pocket of whatever shirt I was wearing every single day. It sounds sentimental, I know, but she always told me I trusted people too easily, that my heart was too open, and the world would take advantage of that someday. Having that small square of fabric near my chest felt like keeping her voice close. I was sitting on the couch watching the evening news on a Tuesday in January when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. "Chris." I answered on the second ring, already smiling. "Hey, buddy." But the voice that came through was not the easy, unhurried voice of a man calling to chat. It was ragged and thin, like something had torn through it. "Dad!" A sharp inhale. "Dad, it's Irene. She collapsed at home about an hour ago. We're at the ER in Burbank. Dad, please come, please." My coffee cup hit the carpet before I even realized I had dropped it. I was already moving toward the door, snatching my keys off the hook, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I'm coming," I said. "Chris, I'm coming right now." "Which hospital?" he told me. I did not bother with a jacket, even though the January night was cold enough to bite. I just ran. I drove that freeway with both hands gripping the wheel, the city lights blurring past on either side, and I prayed the way I had not prayed since Margaret was in her hospital bed, out loud, just under my breath. Just please not. Again, please not. Again. When I pushed through the emergency room doors, I spotted Chris immediately standing against the far wall, arms wrapped around himself, face the color of old chalk. He looked up when he saw me, and his chin started to tremble. "Dad!" His voice cracked completely. I crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. He pressed his face against my shoulder and shook hard, like a man trying not to fall apart at the seams. "She's gonna be okay," I told him, my own voice breaking around the edges. "She has to be okay." A door swung open and a doctor stepped into the hallway. He was trimmed somewhere in his mid-40s with cane brown eyes that somehow made you feel like everything was under control, like he had seen worse than this and guided people through it. "Mr. Miller." He looked between the two of us, then settled his gaze on me. "I'm Dr. Alex Ryder. I need to speak with you and your son." He paused. "Privately, if you don't mind." Dr. Alex Ryder had kind eyes. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Warm, steady, the kind of eyes that made you feel like whatever he was about to say, he had rehearsed it carefully, so it would hurt as little as possible. I trusted men with kind eyes. That, as it turned out, was my first mistake. He led us into a small consultation room off the main hallway. 3 chairs, a table, with a box of tissues in the center, a motivational poster on the wall about hope and healing that someone had hung slightly crooked. Chris dropped into the chair beside me so hard it scraped the floor. His hands were shaking on his knees, and he kept pressing them flat, like he could force them to stop. Dr. Ryder folded his hands on the table and looked at us both. "I won't drag this out," he said. "Irene's blood work came back tonight. What we're seeing is consistent with acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive form. Standard chemotherapy won't be sufficient for her case." He paused. "There is a treatment, a specialized stem cell therapy, offered through a facility called Pacific Stem Cell Institute in Manhattan, New York. It has a strong success rate for cases like hers, but it is not covered by standard insurance, and the cost of the full treatment program is $400,000. The number landed in that small room like something physical. I felt it hit my chest. Chris made a sound I had never heard from him before, somewhere between a gasp and a sob, raw and ugly and desperate. He pressed both hands over his mouth, his eyes flooding so fast the tears spilled over before he could blink them back. 400. He could not finish the sentence. He bent forward in his chair, shoulders heaving, crying in the broken, breathless way that men cry when they have been trying very hard not to. I reached over and grabbed his arm. My own throat had closed up completely, but I held on to him because it was the only useful thing I could think to do. "Is there any other option?" I asked Dr. Ryder. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He shook his head slowly. "Not at her stage. Time is also a factor, Mr. Miller. The sooner treatment begins, the better her prognosis." I thought about getting a second opinion. The thought crossed my mind for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at Chris, at the way his shoulders were shaking, at the way he could not catch his breath, and I let it go. "You have to understand something about me. When someone I love is in danger, I do not research. I move. That has been both my greatest strength, and as it turned out, the open door they walked right through. I know that $400,000 sounds impossible, but stem cell therapy for aggressive leukemia is exactly the kind of treatment that falls outside standard Medicare and private insurance coverage. Experimental protocols, out-of-network specialists, procedures not yet fully approved. At the time, I did not question it. I just drove home and started doing math. I drove home that night on autopilot, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, not really seeing any of it. When I got inside, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Margaret and I used to do our taxes. where Chris did his homework in grade school, and I pulled out a notepad and a pen, and I wrote down every number I could think of. Retirement savings $47,000. That was it. That was everything I had managed to set aside in 40 years of working 6 days a week. 47,000 against 400,000. I stared at that gap, $353,000, until the numbers blurred. I thought about Margaret. I thought about how she used to say, "Frank, you always see the best in people before they show you the worst." I pressed her handkerchief against my face and breathed in, though her scent had long since faded from the fabric. Then I picked up the pen again and started making a different kind of list. The job posting was taped to the window of a warehouse supply company out in Chatsworth, night shift, industrial cleaning, $12 an hour, midnight to 5 a.m. I called the next morning. I started that same week. Those nights in the warehouse were the loneliest of my life. The building was enormous and cold, even in January, the kind of cold that settled into your joints and stayed there. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in that sickly yellow way that makes everything look slightly wrong. I pushed a wide mop across concrete floors that seemed to stretch on forever, and the only sounds were the wheels of the mop bucket and the distant rumble of trucks on the highway outside. On the 15th night, I stopped walking. I looked down at my feet. The sole of my right shoe had been separating from the upper. For 3 days I could feel the cold concrete through the gap with every step. I sat down on an overturned plastic crate, pulled off the shoe, and reached into my jacket pocket for the roll of electrical tape I had started carrying. For exactly this reason, I wrapped it around the toe of the shoe, round and round, pressing it tight. My hands were trembling so badly I had to stop twice to get them under control. I do not know exactly when the tears started. One moment I was wrapping tape around a shoe, and the next my chest was heaving, and I was crying in a way I had not cried since the night Margaret passed. Ugly, gasping, the kind of crying that feels like something tearing loose from deep inside you. "Get it together, Frank," I said out loud, my voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "Your boy needs you. Get up." I pressed Margaret's handkerchief hard against my face. I held it there until my breathing slowed. Then I tucked it back into my breast pocket, put the shoe back on, picked up the mop, and kept going. By the end of February, between the warehouse wages and every account I could drain, I had scraped together $365,500. Still short, but Chris told me Dr. Ryder said they could begin treatment and arrange a payment plan for the remainder. The deed to the house had been in my name alone since Margaret passed. I called the realtor on a Monday morning. My hand was steady when I dialed. My heart was not. They say a house is just wood and concrete. I used to half believe that. I do not believe it anymore. Oh, the realtor's name was Sandra, a brisk woman in her 50s with a clipboard and sensible shoes, who walked through every room of my house in Reseda, like she was doing an inventory of a storage unit. She tapped walls, checked window frames, scribbled notes without looking up. I followed her from room to room, with my hands in my pockets, trying to see the place through her eyes instead of mine. It did not work. Given the square footage and the current market in this zip code, Sandra said, stopping in the middle of the living room, "I'd put the listing price at $320,000. You might get $310, $315 after negotiation. It's a fair number, Mr. Miller." "Okay," I said. She looked up from her clipboard, studying me. "Do you need a few days to think it over?" "No," I said. "Let's move." She nodded, clicked her pen, and kept writing. I turned toward the kitchen doorway so she would not see my face. The sale closed in 11 days. $310,000. The buyer was a young couple from Glendale. I never met them, only signed the papers across a table from their attorney. The notary slid the documents toward me one by one, each page flagged with a little red arrow sticker. I signed my name over and over until it stopped feeling like my name. Before I handed over the keys, I let myself walk through the house one last time alone. I started in the kitchen. The morning light was coming through the window the same way it always had, hitting the counter at that low winter angle that made everything look gold. I ran my hand along the edge of the counter, Margaret's counter, where she rolled pie dough. Every Thanksgiving, where she stood in her bathrobe drinking coffee and listening to the radio on Sunday mornings. My throat tightened so badly I had to stop walking for a moment. Then I saw it. There on the inside of the kitchen doorway, the pencil marks. Chris, age 842. Margaret's handwriting careful and looping the letters slightly faded, but still perfectly clear after all these years. I pressed 2 fingers against it. The wood was cool and smooth under my touch. I stood there with my chest aching so deeply, it felt like grief had physical weight, like it was pressing down on my shoulders and would not let up. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I whispered. "I have to." I turned off the kitchen light and walked out the front door without looking back. If I looked back, I would not have been able to keep moving. The Ford F-150 sold the same afternoon to a man named Greg, who worked construction and needed a truck that could haul materials. He offered $8,500, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. He counted out the cash on the hood of the truck bill by bill and shook my hand. "She's a good truck," Greg said, patting the hood. "Yeah," I said. My voice came out rough. "She really is." I rode the bus back to Chris and Irene's house in Burbank, the envelope of cash on my lap. Margaret's handkerchief pressed between my palm and the envelope the whole ride. 45 minutes. I counted the stops. When Irene opened the door, she looked thinner than the last time I had seen her. Her eyes shadowed her smile, fragile and uncertain. She stepped aside to let me in, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself, like she was always cold. "Dad," she said softly, "you didn't have to come all the way over here. We could have arranged a transfer." "I wanted to bring it myself," I said. I set the envelope on the kitchen table. $365,500, the house, the truck, every dollar I had saved, across 40 years of early mornings and sore knees and oil-stained hands. Irene stared at it. Then her face crumpled, and she started to cry genuinely deeply, her shoulders shaking as the tears streamed down her face. She pressed her hand over her mouth and looked at me with eyes so full of gratitude it made my own chest hurt. "Dad, I can't. This is everything you have. I can't take this from you." I stepped forward and put both hands on her shoulders the way I used to hold Chris when he was small and needed steadying. "You're my family, Irene. That's what family does." She threw her arms around me and cried harder, her whole body trembling against mine. Over her shoulder, I saw Chris standing in the hallway doorway. His eyes were wet, and his jaw was tight, like a man holding something back. "Thank you, Dad," he said. His voice was thick. "I mean it. Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just get her better." Chris said I was welcome to stay in their spare room for as long as I needed until I got back on my feet, he said. It felt good to have a plan. It felt like solid ground. I had not thought far enough ahead to worry about where I would sleep. That might sound careless, but when you have just handed over every dollar you own to save someone's life, logistics feel small. Chris had a spare room. I had a bag with 3 days of clothes. That was enough of a plan for a man like me. I was not thinking about myself. I never was. That was always the problem. I should have paid more attention to what happened next. As I bent down to pick up my bag from this floor, something made me glance up at the two of them. It was just a flash, a look that passed between Irene and Chris in the half-second they thought I was not watching. Not a look of relief, not a look of gratitude. Something else entirely. Something quick and calculated there and gone before I could name it. My stomach turned over once hard. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself grief made people see things that were not there. And honestly, what was I supposed to think? That my son, the boy I taught to change a tire, the one who called me every Sunday just to talk, was standing in that hallway looking at his wife with the eyes of a stranger, because he had been lying to me for months. That the tears were rehearsed, that the shaking hands were theater, I could not hold that thought. My mind refused it. Some betrayals are so large that the people who love you the most are the last ones to see them coming. I straightened up, smiled at my son, and let myself believe that the ground beneath me was still solid. 3 days later, I called Chris to ask about scheduling the first treatment in New York. The phone rang 7 times. Nobody picked up. Before I tell you what happened when I showed up at that door, I need to know if you are still with me. If you have been listening this far, drop a 4 in the comments right now. Just the number 4. That is all. Because what I am about to share is the moment everything changed, and I do not want to say it to an empty room. A note. Before we continue, parts of this story include fictional elements woven in for reflection and storytelling. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for, this is a good place to step away. No hard feelings at all. I took the bus to Burbank that Tuesday morning. 45 minutes, standing, one hand gripping a metal pole, the other pressed against my jacket pocket, where Margaret's handkerchief sat folded against my chest. Every pothole the bus hit sent a jolt up through my knees, the same knees that had given me trouble for years, but I barely felt it. I was too busy telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. A dead phone battery. A busy week. Something ordinary and fixable and fine. I rang the doorbell at 9:17 in the morning. 1 minute passed, then 2. I heard movement inside of footsteps, unhurried, casual. The door swung open and Irene stood in the frame. She was wearing a new blouse. Her hair was freshly done, curled, and pinned back at one side. She had a coffee mug in her right hand, steam still rising from it, and the expression on her face when she saw me was not the warm relief of a sick woman glad to see her father-in-law. It was something cooler than that, something measured. "Dad," she said, "this is a surprise." "I've been calling for 3 days," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Nobody picked up. I got worried. She tilted her head slightly, like my worry was a mildly interesting piece of information. "We've been busy." Something cold moved through my chest. I looked past her into the hallway. "Is Chris home? I just want to make sure everything's okay with the treatment scheduling." "Frank?" Her voice changed. The warmth drained out of it completely, like someone had pulled a plug. She stepped into the doorway so I could not see past her anymore, and looked at me with eyes I did not recognize. Flat. Certain. Done. "There is no treatment," she said. The words did not make sense at first. I actually shook my head like I had misheard. "What? There never was." She took a slow sip of her coffee. "No leukemia. No stem cell institute. No Pacific anything. We made it up, Chris and I. All of it. The diagnosis, the hospital visits, the doctor." She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I've ever seen on a human face. "You handed us $365,000, Frank, and you called it love. I call it something else." The mug in her hand, the new blouse, the curled hair, every detail suddenly felt like a slap. "Chris," my voice cracked open like dry wood. "Chris, where are you?" My son stepped out from the hallway. He was wearing a clean shirt, hands loose at his sides. He looked at me and I watched his face, desperate for something, for any sign of the boy who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms because he was scared of the thunder. There was nothing there. He pressed his lips together and looked away toward the wall. "Son," the word tore out of me. "Say something, please." Chris shook his head once, a single small motion, and stared at a point somewhere past my shoulder. Irene stepped back inside. "Don't come back here, Frank. We're done." The door closed. That small, ordinary click of a latch catching was the loneliest sound I have ever heard. I stood on the sidewalk. The California sun was shining the way it always does in March, indifferent, bright, warming everything equally. Somebody's sprinklers kicked on across the street. A dog barked twice and stopped. My legs stopped working. I sat down on the front steps of the house next door, a stranger's steps, and pressed both hands over my face. A sound came out of me that I did not recognize, something ragged, and animal grief and rage and disbelief all tangled together into one broken noise. My whole body shook. I pulled Margaret's handkerchief out of my pocket and held it against my mouth and cried, the way you cry when you have nothing left to hold back, loudly, desperately, without any dignity at all. I do not know how long I sat there. Long enough that the sprinklers finished their cycle, long enough that the dog stopped barking. Then a car slowed beside the curb and a door opened. Footsteps on the sidewalk, a hand on my shoulder, firm and warm and sure. Frank Miller. The voice was a woman's, a little husky, the kind that came from decades of early mornings. "It's Dorothy Kowalski, from Delano Street, back in Reseda. I've got my car right here. Come on now, get up." Her name was Dorothy Kowalski. She went by Dot. She was 68 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, with silver hair, cut short and practical, and she smelled like dish soap and hand lotion, the exact same combination my mother used to wear on Sunday mornings. I had known her for 11 years as the woman on Delano Street, who waved from her porch and always had her Christmas lights up before Thanksgiving. I had never once sat at her kitchen table and fallen apart in front of her. That afternoon I did exactly that. She did not ask me a single question in the car. She just drove both hands on the wheel radio, off eyes on the road, and let the quiet sit between us like something comfortable instead of something awkward. When we pulled into her driveway on Delano Street, 3 blocks from where my house used to be, she put the car in park and said, "Can you walk?" "Yes," I said. "Good. Come on then." Inside, she sat me down at her kitchen table, a round wooden table with a plastic floral tablecloth and a ceramic rooster in the center that had clearly been there for 30 years, and she put the kettle on without asking if I wanted tea. While it heated, she pulled a quilt off the back of the couch and draped it over my shoulders, like I was a child who had come in from the rain. That small gesture broke something open in me all over again. My eyes burned and my throat seized up, and I had to press both hands flat on the table just to keep myself from shaking apart. "Dot," I managed. I don't know how to. "You don't have to know anything right now," she said firmly, setting a mug of tea in front of me. "Drink that first, then talk. Or don't talk. Either way is fine by me." I drank the tea. Then I talked. It came out in pieces, disjointed and clumsy the way pain always comes out when you have been holding it in too long. I told her about the diagnosis, about the warehouse nights, about signing away the house. My voice cracked and rebuilt itself and cracked again. When I got to the part about Irene's face in the doorway, the coldness of it, the coffee mug in her hand, like none of it cost her a single moment of sleep, I had to stop completely. My chest heaved so hard I had to press a fist against my sternum just to breathe. Dot reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her grip was firm and warm. "My husband Harold lost his job in 2008, she said quietly. "The bank called on a Thursday. By Monday we were behind on everything. I know what it looks like when a man has had the floor taken out from under him, Frank. I've seen that face before, on someone I loved very much." Her eyes went bright for just a moment. That particular shine of grief that never fully goes away just gets quieter over time. She blinked it back and squeezed my hand harder. "You're going to be okay," she said. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you are." I wanted to believe her. I was not sure I could. That night, I lay on her sofa, under the quilt, staring up at a ceiling I did not recognize in a house that was not mine, 3 blocks from where mine used to be. Outside the window, the Reseda streetlights threw the same pale yellow glow they always had, the same light I had fallen asleep to for 40 years, just from the wrong angle now. I pressed Margaret's handkerchief against my face and whispered into the dark, "What do I do now, Margaret? Tell me what to do." The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. My chest ached so deeply it felt like something structural, like a beam inside me had cracked, and the whole building was settling wrong. I did not sleep for a long time. When I finally did, I dreamed of my old kitchen back in Reseda, not this one mine, and Margaret standing at the counter in her bathrobe, laughing at something on the radio, not knowing I was watching, not knowing I was memorizing her. My phone buzzed on the coffee table at 7:43 the next morning. A number I recognized immediately, one I had not heard from in almost 2 years. I answered before the second ring. "Frank?" The voice was low and unhurried, built from years of working with his hands and not wasting words. "It's Marcus Webb. I just heard what happened. I'm on my way over right now." Marcus Webb and I had worked side by side for 11 years at the same shop on Roscoe Boulevard. He was not a man who talked much. He expressed himself through showing up. If your car broke down, Marcus was the one who pulled over. If your wife was in the hospital, Marcus was the one who brought food without being asked. He did not call to check in. He just appeared solid and quiet and useful, like a load-bearing wall you never noticed until you needed it most. He knocked on Dot's door at 8:15 that morning, carrying 2 large coffees and a paper bag from the diner on Reseda Boulevard. He took one look at my face, the swollen eyes, the gray skin, the way I was sitting hunched at Dot's kitchen table like a man waiting for a verdict, and he set everything down, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." So I did, again. It hurt just as much the second time. Marcus listened without interrupting his coffee going cold in front of him, his jaw getting tighter with every sentence. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose a slow, controlled breath, the kind a man takes when he is working very hard not to say something he cannot take back. "Frank," he said, his voice low and deliberate. My cousin went through something similar 3 years ago. Lost his savings to a caretaker. That's when I learned what they did to you has a name. In California, it's called elder financial abuse. It's a felony under Penal Code 368. That means it's not just a civil matter, it's a criminal one. You can report this. You should report this. Who's going to believe me? My voice came out raw and bitter. I'm a 65-year-old man with no house, no car, no documentation. It's my word against theirs. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not argue with me. He just typed Irene Torres into the Facebook search bar and turned the screen around to face me. The profile was public. The most recent post was 3 days old. Irene was standing on a sun-drenched terrace at the Four Seasons in Santa Barbara, wearing a white sundress, her hair loose and shining, holding a cocktail glass with a little orange slice on the rim. She was laughing at something off camera, her head thrown back, completely radiant. The caption read, "Finally living. 247 likes. I know what you are thinking. Why would someone who just pulled off a fraud that size post pictures for the whole world to see?" I thought the same thing. But Marcus explained it to me later, and it made a cold kind of sense. People like Irene do not feel caught. They feel untouchable. In their mind, I was an old man with no lawyer, no documentation, and no credibility. Who was I going to call? What was I going to prove? The photos were not careless. They were confidence. The confidence of someone who had done this before and gotten away with it. My stomach dropped so fast I actually grabbed the edge of the table. "Keep scrolling," Marcus said quietly. The next photo was Chris, standing next to his wife on what looked like a hotel balcony, arm around her waist, grinning at the camera like a man without a single care in the world. The same son who had looked straight through me on that Burbank sidewalk. The same son who had not said one word while his wife dismantled my entire life. Something happened inside my chest in that moment, something I can only describe as a crack, followed by a hardening, like a bone breaking and then setting itself at a new angle, stronger and colder than before. "That's my money," I said. The words came out flat and certain. "That is my house, my truck, 40 years of my life." "Yes," Marcus said, "it is." I pushed the phone back across the table. My hands were trembling not from grief this time, but from something that felt a great deal like fury taking shape into something purposeful. "What do I do, Marcus?" I asked. "I know a woman," he said. "Attorney named Diana Flores, downtown L.A. She handles exactly this kind of case. Elder fraud, financial abuse. She's going to want to hear every detail." He paused. "But Frank, we're going to need evidence. Your word is a start, but it's not enough on its own." Dot, who had been standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in her hands, stepped forward. "Then we find evidence?" she said with a firmness that surprised me. "That's what comes next." I nodded. And for the first time since that Tuesday morning in Burbank, something shifted in the air around me. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But the first outline of it, like light starting to show at the very edge of a dark horizon. That night, at 9:15, someone knocked on Dot's front door. 3 knocks, hesitant, uncertain, like a person not entirely sure they had the right to be there. Dot looked through the window and turned back to me with an expression I could not quite read. "There's a man outside, Frank," she said. "Says his name is Ryder, Dr. Alex Ryder. Before I tell you what that man brought to my door that night, before you hear what finally broke me open and put me back together, at the same time leave a comment with, 'I'm here, Frank. I need to know you are still listening.' Because what comes next is the hardest part of this story. The part I almost could not say out loud. Just a reminder, some details in this story are fictional, shaped for education and reflection. If this is not for you, it is okay to stop here. Choose what serves your heart." He looked worse than I did, and I had just lost everything. Dr. Alex Ryder stood in Dot's doorway with his shoulders caved inward and his eyes so sunken it looked like sleep had abandoned him weeks ago. He was wearing the same kind of neat collared shirt I remembered from the hospital consultation room, but it was wrinkled now, untucked on one side like he had been wearing it for too many days in a row. In his right hand he held a phone, old cracked screen, gripped so tight his knuckles had gone pale. "Mr. Miller," his voice was barely above a whisper, "I know you have no reason to let me through that door. But I'm asking anyway. I stepped back and let him in. He sat at Dot's kitchen table, the same table where I had fallen apart the night before, and he could not look at me directly. His gaze kept dropping to the surface of the table, to his own hands, to the phone he set down in front of him, like it was something dangerous. I practiced what I was going to say, he started. On the drive over, I had the whole thing worked out. He let out a short, broken laugh that had no humor in it at all. I can't remember any of it now. Then just say it plain, Marcus said from across the table, his voice hard as gravel. Ryder flinched. Then he nodded. Irene approached me 8 months before you ever sat in that consultation room, he said, his voice gaining the thin steadiness as he forced himself forward. I was in debt. A malpractice suit, nothing criminal, but it had drained everything I had. My license was on a probationary review. She knew all of that. I still don't know how. He pressed his palms flat on the table. She offered me $50,000 to create a complete false medical file. Blood panels, imaging reports, a diagnosis letter, all of it formatted to look like it came from a legitimate oncology practice. She gave me the name Pacific Stem Cell Institute and a Manhattan address to put on the letterhead. Dot made a sharp sound from the corner, not quite a gasp, something tighter than that, like air escaping a wound. I did it, Ryder said. His voice cracked on those 3 words, and he had to stop jaw-working eyes going wet and red at the corners. I told myself it was temporary, that I would pay it back somehow, that nobody would really get hurt. He looked up at me for the first time, and what I saw in his face was not the kind eyes I had trusted in that consultation room. It was something rawer than that genuine ugly shame. I was wrong on every count. She never paid you, Marcus said. It was not a question. The day after you signed the house over, Ryder said, looking at me, she blocked my number, cleaned out the burner email we used, quit the clinic, disappeared. His voice dropped. I went to their house. Chris answered the door and told me I had no proof of anything and that if I contacted them again, he would report me to the medical board himself. The blood in my veins went so cold I felt it in my fingertips. I recorded our last meeting, Ryder said. He picked up the phone. It was in Las Vegas. I drove out there specifically because Nevada is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record the conversation without telling them. California law would have made it complicated. Nevada law made it clean. He set the phone on the table and pressed play. The recording started with background noise, a hotel lobby, the distant sound of slot machines. Then Irene's voice came through clear and unhurried. The old man will sell the house. He loves Chris too much not to. Then Chris, my son, the boy I had taught to change a tire on a Sunday afternoon in our driveway, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder watching football, whose first word was Dada. Dad's always been easy like that. He'll do anything I ask. He always has. The sound that came out of me was not a word. It was not a cry. It was something underneath both of those things, a sound from a place so deep inside me, I did not know it existed until that moment ripped it open. Dot was at my side instantly, her hand on my back, pressing hard like she was trying to hold me together from the outside, since I could not manage it from the inside. I reached into my breast pocket. I took out Margaret's handkerchief, the one with the lavender flowers along the edge, the one I had carried every single day for 3 years. I unfolded it carefully, smoothed it flat on the table, with both palms, and then I folded it again deliberately, corner to corner, crisp and exact. What do I need to do? I asked. My voice had gone somewhere very quiet and very certain. Marcus leaned forward. Tomorrow morning, Diana Flores, downtown L.A. She's going to want to hear every word of that recording, Frank. Every single word. Diana Flores had a wall full of framed degrees behind her desk and a cup of coffee she had completely forgotten to drink. It had been sitting there long enough to go cold, and she had not touched it once since we walked in because she was listening that hard. She was somewhere in her mid-40s with sharp, dark eyes that missed nothing and a way of sitting very still while you talked that made you feel like every word you said was being weighed and filed away. Marcus and I had barely finished the introductions before she held up one hand and said, "Start from the beginning. Don't summarize. I want everything." So I told her everything. Again, the diagnosis, the warehouse nights, the shoe with the electrical tape, selling the house. The moment Irene's face changed in that Burbank doorway, the recording from Las Vegas. When I finished, Diana did not react with sympathy or outrage. She leaned back in her chair, pressed 2 fingers against her lips, and thought for a long moment. Then she sat forward. "Mr. Miller, what they did to you falls under multiple areas of law," she said, her voice precise and steady. "First, elder financial abuse under California Penal Code 368, because you are 65 or older, and the financial loss exceeded a certain threshold. This becomes a felony, not a misdemeanor, a felony with serious prison exposure. Second, wire fraud under federal law, Title 18 of the United States Code Section 1343. They used phone calls, electronic transfers, and fraudulent documents sent across state lines to execute this scheme. Third, and this is what makes your case federal, the address they put on that letterhead: Pacific Stem Cell Institute, Manhattan, New York. The moment they created a fictitious business address in another state to solicit money, they triggered interstate fraud statutes. That means this is not just LAPD's jurisdiction. This belongs to the FBI. My chest tightened when she said that. Not from fear, from something closer to relief, so sharp it almost hurt. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "So what's the first move?" "We go to LAPD today," Diana said, already reaching for her notepad. "We file a formal report and present the recording, the false medical documents, and the bank transfer records, showing the money leaving Frank's account. Simultaneously, I will submit a referral to the FBI field office on Wilshire. Dr. Ryder will need to sign a cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutor. He provides testimony and evidence in exchange for a reduced charge. The Nevada recording is admissible. The false letterhead is physical evidence. The bank records are irrefutable." She looked at me directly. "I want to be honest with you. This process takes time, but the foundation here is solid. Solid enough that I am willing to take this case pro bono, meaning no cost to you." My throat tightened so fast I had to look at the ceiling for a moment to keep myself from embarrassing myself in her office. At the LAPD station on Devonshire, Officer Ray Castillo received us in a small interview room that smelled like burned coffee and old carpet. He was a heavy-set man in his early 40s, with a careful, skeptical face, the kind of face that had heard too many stories that did not hold together. "Mr. Miller," he said, setting his pen down after I finished, "I want to make sure I understand. You're alleging that your daughter-in-law and your own son conspired to defraud you of over $365,000 using a falsified medical records." "That's correct," I said, "and your son was aware of the scheme from the beginning." "Play the recording," I said. Castillo listened to the Las Vegas recording without expression. When it ended, he picked his pen back up and began writing. He did not ask another skeptical question. 2 days later, Diana called me at Dot's house just after 6 in the morning. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear something underneath it, a current of electricity, of momentum. "Frank, the FBI ran the address. Pacific Stem Cell Institute in Manhattan has never existed. It's a vacant lot currently zoned for development. And when they cross-referenced Irene Torres in their system," she paused for just a beat, "there was an existing complaint from 18 months ago. A different victim. The case was closed when the complainant withdrew, but the file was never purged. Your case just gave them everything they needed to reopen it and combine the investigations." Diana explained it to me afterward. "Normally, a fraud investigation at the federal level takes months, sometimes years. But we were not starting from scratch. The FBI already had a file on Irene Torres. Another victim had reported her 18 months earlier. Then, for reasons the FBI could not disclose, withdrew the complaint. The file stayed open in their system, flagged but dormant. When my case came in with the Nevada, recording the false Manhattan address, and Ryder's signed cooperation agreement, it was not a new investigation. It was the missing piece of one that already existed. That is why they moved fast. We handed them the key to a door they had been standing in front of for a year and a half. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Diana said, and I could hear the certainty in her voice like something forged from steel. "The FBI moves. They know where Irene and Chris are going to be tonight. Beverly Hills. Frank, stay home. Let them do their job." Diana told me to stay home. For once in my life, I did exactly what I was told. Dot and I sat in her kitchen that evening without turning on the television. She made a pot of chamomile tea and set it between us on the table with the ceramic rooster and the floral tablecloth, and we just sat there in the warm yellow light, two old people waiting for a phone to ring. Dot kept her hands wrapped around her mug. My hands would not stay still. I kept pressing them flat on the table, then folding them in my lap, then pressing them flat again. "Talk to me about something," I said finally. "Anything. I can't just sit here thinking." Dot thought for a moment. "Harold once burned Thanksgiving dinner so badly the smoke alarm went off 3 times, and the neighbors called the fire department," she said. "He was so embarrassed he didn't speak for an hour. Then he drove to Denny's and came back with 2 plates of turkey and mashed potatoes and set them on the table like nothing had happened." I laughed. It surprised me, a real laugh, short and sudden, coming up from somewhere I thought had gone dry. It hurt a little, the way laughing does when you have been crying too much. "Margaret burned exactly one thing in 40 years of cooking," I said. "A grilled cheese sandwich. She was distracted because she was reading. She got so mad at herself she threw the whole pan in the trash pan and all." Dot burst out laughing, and for a few minutes we were just 2 people in a kitchen telling stories about people we had loved and lost, and the world outside felt very far away. At 11:14 that night, my phone rang. Diana's voice was steady, but underneath it, I could hear something vibrating, the particular frequency of controlled excitement, in a person who had worked very hard for a very long time toward a single moment. "Frank, it's done. FBI and LAPD executed the warrants at the venue approximately 40 minutes ago. Irene Torres, Chris Miller, and 3 associates were taken into custody without incident." A pause. "They were at a private dinner party, Frank. Champagne, catered food, a rented house in Beverly Hills with a pool." Another pause, shorter. "They found laptops, offshore account documentation, and evidence connecting them to at least 4 other victims across 2 states." I set the phone down on the table very carefully, like it was made of something fragile. Dot looked at my face, and her eyes filled immediately. "Frank, they got them," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper, but it was steady. "They got all of them." Dot pressed both hands over her mouth and started to cry, the relieved, grateful kind of crying that sounds almost like laughing if you are not listening closely. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand with both of hers and squeezed so hard my knuckles cracked. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom at the Los Angeles Superior Court, in a suit Marcus had helped me pick out from a thrift store on Van Nuys Boulevard. I read my victim impact statement from a single sheet of paper in a voice that did not shake once. I said I gave everything I had because I believed it was the right thing to do. I am not ashamed of that. I am only asking this court to make sure that what was done in response to that love is answered for completely. The judge sentenced Irene Torres to 10 years in federal prison, plus a full restitution order. Chris Miller received 7 years. Dr. Alex Ryder, whose cooperation had been essential to the prosecution, received 18 months and the permanent revocation of his medical license. When the gavel came down, I looked at Chris. He was sitting at the defense table with his head bowed and his hands folded in front of him, and when he felt my eyes on him, he looked up. His face was pale and hollowed out, the face of a man who had finally run out of places to hide. I held his gaze for a long moment. I wanted him to see that I was still standing, that 65 years of hard work and loss and love had not broken me even when he tried his best to make it. Then I looked away, not in anger, just forward. Diana told me afterward that the restitution order would likely recover only a fraction of what had been stolen. The offshore accounts had already been partially drained. In the end, I received $41,000 from the funds that had been frozen. It was not everything. It was enough to start. I rented a small workshop space on Satakoy Street in Reseda. 1 room, a rolling door, a concrete floor that reminded me of every shop I had ever worked in. Marcus helped me move in a second-hand workbench and my old toolbox, which he had been storing in his garage since the day I sold the house. "Not bad," Marcus said, looking around the empty space with his hands on his hips. "It's mine," I said. "That's enough." That afternoon, sitting on an overturned crate in the middle of my new workshop, I reached into my breast pocket and took out Margaret's handkerchief. The lavender embroidery had faded a little more since January, but the stitches were still there, patient and exact the way she did everything. I pressed it against my chest and held it there. Outside, the sun was going down over Reseda, in that particular way it does in October, all orange and pink and unhurried like it has nowhere else to be. I've thought about this a lot sitting in my little workshop on Satakoy Street, watching the sun go down over Reseda. Here is what I know now: family justice does not come from blood. It comes from truth. And truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds its way into the light. I am living proof of that. I am a father who lost everything. And I want to tell you something directly, man to man. Don't be like me. Don't let love make you blind. Don't hand over your life savings because someone cried convincingly. Ask questions. Verify. Protect yourself because nobody else will do it for you. A revenge dad does not go looking for trouble, but when trouble comes for his family, he stands up. Every single time. Because real family justice is not just about the courtroom. It is about refusing to disappear quietly. Every revenge dad who has ever been broken by the people he loved the most knows exactly what I mean. You fight back not with hatred, but with truth. And when the dust settles, when the gavel comes down, that is when a broken revenge dad finally understands what family justice truly costs. God gave me Dot. God gave me Marcus. And in the end, God gave me the strength to keep going. If this story moved, you share it. Leave a comment. What would you have done? Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted purely for reflection and education. If that is not what you are looking for, we completely understand. Please choose content that speaks to your heart.